I'm joined on the Crispin Flintoff show by Rob Barnstone of the No Third Runway Coalition, the coordinator. How are you doing, Rob?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, no, I'm really interested to hear your views on what's happened this week, the announcements the announcement that has been made this week. I'm just going to play some footage of what the announcement was, what we've heard from Rachel Reeves.
The question of whether to give Heathrow, our only hub airport, a third runway has run on for decades. According to the most recent study from Frontier Economics, a third runway could increase potential GDP by 0.43% by 2050. Over half, 60% of that boost, would go to areas outside of London and the southeast, increasing trade opportunities for products like Scotch whisky and Scottish salmon, already two of the biggest British exports out of Heathrow. And a third runway could create over 100,000 jobs. For international investors, persistent delays have cast doubt about our seriousness towards improving our economic prospects. Business groups like the CBI, the Federation of Small Businesses, and the Chambers of Commerce right across the UK, as well as trade unions like GMB and Unite, are clear. A third runway is badly needed.
That's how she introduced it. She was then scrutinised on interviews on the BBC and other media about what the plans are. And this is what she said about the speed of which she'll deliver this expansion, the third runway.
I think we can get that done in a decade. And I say that because we're not just announcing that we back it, we are changing the way that our planning system works to make it easier to deliver projects like the third runway at Heathrow. So that's why we've said we want the plans by this summer, and we want to give that development consent order in this parliament so we can start building. Some people say this will take decades. It doesn't have to take decades. We can crack on, and we are determined as a government to do so.
That's quite shocking that she could do it she says by summer, get this approved. But then when she's scrutinised about the actual pollution aspect of it, she kind of made herself look a bit silly, I think. But this is what she said in another interview.
Is it true, Chancellor, that just a few years ago, you yourself fought against an expansion of Leeds Bradford Airport, citing air and noise pollution reasons?
So that was in the pandemic when people weren't really flying. A lot has changed since then, including how aeroplanes fly and including sustainable aviation fuel. And as that evidence changes, I think it is right to look again at airport expansion. We've already, as a government, signed off expansion at Stansted Airport because we know how important it is to make sure that Britain is connected. But the changes in the way we fly are so important. Sustainable aviation fuel is changing the way that the energy intensity, the carbon emissions from flying are coming down. That's why I say that sustainable aviation and economic growth do and can go hand in hand.
Did you have any idea that this government was going to introduce this third runway proposal?
Well, it kind of took us by surprise a little bit. I mean, we were in Parliament having a meeting last Monday about airport expansion at Heathrow when the news article from Bloomberg came through, which first suggested that the government was going to back a third runway the following week. So it kind of took us by surprise a little bit. But, you know, as a campaign group which is set up to oppose the expansion of Heathrow, we're kind of always on edge waiting for announcements. And we've had announcements before, particularly when the Theresa May government backed a third runway. And yet we're no further forward with the project. So it was a kind of a bit of a surprise in terms of how soon it came for this government, but at the same time, we're not altogether surprised.
She said in that interview that this could be approved by the summer. This could all be started in the summer. I mean, that's quite alarming. have you got any way that you can think this could be stopped?
Yeah, I mean, the proposals are still going to have to go through the planning process, and that will take several years, despite what Rachel Reeves says about the process being streamlined. It's still going to take some time, right? These things are not going to happen overnight, and there will no doubt be various legal challenges to the project as well, which also take some time. So this is not going to be a quick fix, and I think it's a very ambitious for the Chancellor to say that this will happen within 10 years. Heathrow themselves have said it will take at least 10 years. Other experts have suggested that it will take well into the 2040s. So this is not a project that's a quick fix for the economy, which seems to be, listening to all her other announcements that she made on Wednesday, that seems to be what the Chancellor was after, quick fixes. This is not a quick fix.
Yeah. And the thing that she said, I couldn't really get my head around the fact that so much air freight goes through Heathrow already, and to make out that it needs more. I mean, there's other places in the country that could do the same work. I don't understand the thinking that you have to put more into Heathrow. That it's not logically necessary that you have to do that, is it?
Absolutely, and I think that one of the things that we've been saying across the announcement this week in response to that announcement is that you look at the other projects that are in the pipeline. So you've got airport expansion at Gatwick, bringing their emergency runway into use, and you've also got Luton Airport as well. Those decisions are expected to be made literally in the next few weeks, coupled with the announcement before Christmas that the government gave expansion the go-ahead at Stansted Airport and at City Airports. This is creating a lot of extra capacity and inevitably freight capacity. So it seems that this extra capacity would create an additional 60 million passengers per year. That's more than a third runway could ever offer. So in a sense, there's your third runway. It's just spread around other London airports. And let's not forget, London's the economic magnet that brings people together. It's not all about one airport in West London.
Hmm. And I mean, the other thing that just, I mean, it's ridiculous. She said this sustainable aviation fuel makes it all okay for environmental purposes. That isn't anything like the main problem with the environmental impact, because it's not about the plane in the air. It's about all the cars, all the other stuff that has to go around to get people to the airport and will pollute, the M25, all the roads going to Heathrow. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Her idea of the environmental impact. It's interesting that Sadiq Khan's questioning it. Do you think that's a possible hope that it will be challenged by even, the London mayor?
Yeah, I think so. And the Mayor of London indicated this week that he's going to scrutinise the plans very closely, and any legal action might be forthcoming after that. So we'll have to wait and see. But I do think that, like you said, that sustainable aviation fuels are not the be all and end all to the environmental arguments. And it does seem a little strange that the Chancellor is sort of conflating the two, saying that you can have a third runway and economic growth because sustainable aviation fuels are the answer to that. We would question that and say that, like you said, it's a lot of it's about the traffic that will be created, the hundreds and millions of extra car journeys using polluted cars that will take place across roads around West London, the additional pressures on the transport systems which will need to be upgraded, and like I said just a minute ago, third runway means 700 additional flights per day. They are not all going to be running on sustainable aviation fuels. The target is only for a maximum of 2% by 2030, and no doubt the target won't progress a great deal further beyond that, because this is a very new technology which takes considerable time to develop. So I don't think that it's the answer. And yes, it's good to see some progression in the sector, on environmental travel, but it's not gonna create, again, like I just said, this quick fix that the Chancellor seems to be after.
Labour MPs who've campaigned to stop the third runway, I know, like John McDonnell and people like Andy Slaughter and others in West London, they'll be really distressed by what's going on because they want to keep the whip, but their constituents are going to be enraged at this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw in the House of Commons on Tuesday, in response to the urgent question that was laid down by the Green Party, there were quite a lot of Labour MPs lining up to put in their two pennies worth to state their opposition to the third runway. So I think there's definitely a movement within the Labour Party opposing a third runway, and also we are hearing from MPs outside of London that are very concerned about what all this so-called investment means for the north. A third runway is not going to deliver the connectivity and growth in the north of the country that the government seem to think it will. And you've got MPs like John Trickett, for example. I saw he wrote a piece on Labour List saying, "What about the north?" You've got Andy Burnham saying, coming out against a third runway as well last week. So there's a growing consensus even amongst Labour politicians outside of the south and London and the southeast that this is completely the wrong answer.
Joining me on the Crispin Flintoff show is Adrian Townsend. How are you doing, Adrian?
I'm very well, thank you, Crispin.
Thank you for agreeing to speak about the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. I mean, you're a parish councillor in Oxfordshire, so I thought you'd be good to speak on this because you've been looking at this issue of this Oxford-Cambridge. I think it was called an arc, now it's called a corridor. You've been looking at this for quite some time. I'll just show people a map that's been put out of this. This is a promotional map. It has lots of universities and campuses and enterprise zones from Oxford to Cambridge, and it's including Northampton, Milton Keynes, Bedford. There's all different places there.
Yes.
And this is what Rachel Reeves says about the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. I'm going to read it out instead of playing her speech, and I'll do it a bit in the style of Rachel Reeves for entertainment value. This is what she said. Oxford and Cambridge offer huge economic potential for our nation's growth prospects. Just 66 miles apart, these cities are home to two of the best universities in the world, two of the most intensive innovation clusters in the world, and the area is a hub for globally renowned science and technology firms in life sciences, manufacturing, and AI. It has the potential to be Europe's Silicon Valley, the home of British innovation. To grow, these world-class companies need world-class talent who should be able to get to work quickly and find somewhere to live in the local area. But to get from Oxford to Cambridge by train takes 2.5 hours. There is no way to commute directly from towns like Bedford and Milton Keynes to Cambridge by rail, and there is a lack of affordable housing across the region. Oxford and Cambridge are two of the least affordable cities in the UK. In other words, the demand is there, but there are far too many supply-side constraints on economic growth in the region. So her concern is growth. The problem of people commuting is it's a nightmare to commute apparently from Oxford to Cambridge, and people can't afford to live around there. So we've got to do some stuff with it. Is this something you've heard before?
Oh, yes, we've heard all this before, and I'd like to make it very clear from the beginning that we're not against development and world-class research from the universities, and we do anything to support that. Our problem is about the living conditions and the countryside around us. Oxford is already expanding. It's been expanding. It's going to be on our doorstep very, very soon. We're only 4 miles out of the city anyway. And it's the ever encroachment of Oxford city into the countryside. I'll come up straight away and say what particularly angers us here is that we're not against university research, and we're very proud of some of the that the university have got. But when it comes to building, they don't care a stuff about local people. They'll build wherever they want, provided it's not close to them within their beautiful city. And those of us who live on the edge, just getting into Oxford on a bus, we'll take the bus, takes us forever, because Oxford City Council, in their wisdom, have decided that a lot of the local streets will become resident-only places, and the one main route into Oxford is just crowded. We live, what, 3.5 miles out of the city. On the bus, it can take us 3/4 of an hour to get in.
Wow.
So it's the expansion of Oxford City, and I know I've got friends who live in Cambridge. They are as opposed to their expansion as well. We're talking about building. We're talking about expansion into the countryside. We're not against all the wonderful things that the research could do. Many of us would say, why can't the university take some of its research findings and set up in areas of the country that need it? We don't need it here.
Right. And I mean, the accusation of NIMBYism is obviously something that would be thrown at you. But I'd just like to say, I know that in Oxford, they are boasting about how green their city is and how there's no pollution in their city. But if they are enabling their city to have no pollution, but pushing it all out to the countryside, it's clearly not something that's good for the planet. It's just good for their city.
That's exactly it. And we're not NIMBYs. In fact, I submitted my own proposals for development on the edge of our village, on the site where they want to build 1,800 houses on the edge of our village. 1,800 houses on the edge of our small village. And I submitted an alternative proposal which would keep the farmland, which is productive farmland. It would keep that and provide I recommended that we provide a farmland which is where young people could learn to farm in a way which is environmentally, and it would provide 300 jobs for local people. It's just, it can't compete with 1,800.
So what I mean, with the attacks on farmers and the inheritance tax, which we've covered on the show as well. I mean, does this show that the government, and do you think it's Labour or Tory? Do you think they're both as bad? Do you think they just don't have any respect for the countryside and for green spaces or for the green belt, effectively?
Well, I agree with you entirely. I think they're both as bad as each other. They don't understand the countryside. I've been a Labour supporter all of my life, except for the last election. I couldn't support their proposals for how they want to destroy the countryside. It's made worse by the fact that a lot of our local farmers would jump at the idea of making a fortune from selling land. A lot of our local farmers, of course, don't own the land, they're tenants of it. The biggest people to make money out of this, in our case, would be one of the colleges in Oxford, Brasenose. They would make millions out of the sale of their land. Millions. That's what it's about.
Were you caught by surprise when you heard about this plan, or you kind of thought this might be coming up? Because I seem to remember it was shelved by, I think it was Theresa May government, and then it's just re-emerged. It's just did it take you by surprise?
No, sadly it didn't. Not when it comes from the Chancellor, whose views on politics and the Labour Party are her and mine are miles apart. I don't regard her as a Labour Chancellor. No, so I'm not surprised it came up again because of the powers that be. The universities want it to happen. And both here in Oxford, I can quite honestly say the universities get what they want. Or should I say the colleges? And if I say the university, they say we're all separate colleges. They play games like that. So Cambridge is in the same position. The universities get what they want.
And do you think a campaign can be launched to stop it? Do you think it's too late? Have you resigned to it?
I have to say I'm partially resigned to it. I'm 73 now, and I'm looking at I think, well, maybe just delay it before I won't be around any longer. It will come. The card they play so well, and you had to mention it earlier, is they'll just play me and people who live in Oxford as NIMBY. We're middle class NIMBYs, which is very far from the truth. I grew up in the village I live in. I know farmers and work with them, and they're playing that game, which I don't like. I don't like the urbanisation of Labour. And they've got a lot of, I'd say, people who live in cities who perhaps don't understand the countryside, but think we're all a load of NIMBYs. It's not the case. We just want to live in a reasonable world where everybody gets their fair share. I thought that was Labour policy.